Hey guys, Snoopy here. Today we're looking at the Fuel Drinker, which is the third leader in the base game of Arcs. Fuel Drinker has two abilities. The first trait is Insatiable. When you copy or pivot in order to tax, you gain one fuel along with a taxed resource. The second trait is Lavish. After scoring, you must discard all of your fuel if the Tycoon ambition was scored. Fuel Drinker also begins with two resources. They're going to be two fuel resources. And then we see the standard setup. So we have a city in A with 3 ships, a starport in B with 3 ships, and then 2 ships in C. What to say about Fuel Drinker? Well, I think the main concept with these leaders, as we saw with the Mystic, is that when you have a leader with a copy or pivot ability, that's going to encourage you to not have the initiative. And so if you're copying someone who's doing the admin action, then you can get a free fuel out of it. Or if you have a lot of admin cards, you can just pivot at the right time to take one tax action, but by doing that one tax action, you're getting a second resource. Lavish is a pretty significant downside. So you are getting fuel, which is pushing you towards Tycoon. But whenever that ambition is scored, you're having to discard all your fuel. And you also begin with 2 fuel. So what do we think about this? Well, you're encouraged to use your resource. So simply because you have fuel doesn't mean you need to go for Tycoon. What that means is that you can use your fuel as extra moves. And so if you can build a sizable fleet and be in positions to move when your opponents catapult out, you can raid them in their starports. You can move in when they build just a one city as they're spreading out and now tax their city and get extra fuel to keep attacking and suppressing your opponents because they're just spread too thin, and you have the large fleet and you can just move from city to city and tax their cities and take their agents. So think of fuel drinkers as just getting extra action whenever you tax by copying or pivoting. At the Tycoon ambition, if you can win it, when it's in a later act or you have all your cities out where you can get a lot of extra points, yeah, go for it. But if Tycoon is declared, then think about how you can spend your fuel to best take advantage of your leader before you lose it. There's several guild cards of note for Fuel Drinker. We have 3 here from the Leaders in Lore expansion pack. That's Empath's Bond, Tycoon's Charm, and Warlord's Cruelty. Let's start with Empath's Bond. While Empath is declared, you may tax any cities and build ships and catapult move with any starports, like they are loyal, like they're your own. Now you don't take captives, and you do build ships damaged and blockaded systems, which just means that your opponents rule instead of you. So, with Empath being declared, you're now able to tax any city and then take a fuel resource. Additionally, you can build ships and other opponents' starports and then try to use your fuel to move them around as needed. Tycoon's Charm. As a prelude action, while Tycoon is declared, you may discard any number of material and fuel to gain 1 resource for each. And then as a prelude, you may discard this to clear material and fuel outrage. Tycoon's Charm is excellent. Tycoon's Charm is something that I think every Fuel Drinker player will want to have, just because in a pinch, if Tycoon is going to be scored at the last second, you can choose to get rid of your fuel and get something else. Now, this means that you're not going to probably win Tycoon, but at the same time, you could use this to trade out your fuel for material instead. So just think about that you can still win Tycoon if you replace your fuel for material, and then when you score Tycoon, your Fuel Drinker doesn't have to discard any fuel. So that's why for all of these, I think Tycoon's Charm is probably the best way to mitigate Fuel Drinker's lavish trait. Let's look at our next card here, Living Structures. This is in the base game. Nurture, which is replacing a build action, which just says tax oil city. So what this means is that with construction cards or material, you can then tax a city that's one of your own, and you get that fuel. and so it still applies with your leader ability. This is a really powerful lore, and the second ability is also helpful. Prune, which is a repair action, replace a loyal starport with a loyal city, or vice versa. Uh, Again, this is something that's very helpful for certain builds where you are spreading out your starports first to build up your fleet, and now you want to transition to maybe doing your cities now that you have a lot of ships. This lets you do that, and it lets you do that through the repair action, which you can do with a material. You can do with a psionic if the lead card is admin, or the lead card is a construction card, or you could just use those cards. You can just use the admin card to repair, or use the construction card to repair, and then you can swap out your starports for cities, or vice versa. Warlord's Cruelty. While Warlord is declared, you may tax cities that you already taxed this turn. Now, with your ability to pivot and copy, that normally gives you just one action. However, you can use Psionic to tax as well. Now, that Psionic doesn't give you the extra fuel, but in essence, this is letting you do this again. And so if you lead with this, you're going to be taxing a lot. You maybe have a strategy where you're taxing your opponent's cities, and so you're going to lead with an admin card, and you have 3 or maybe 4 pips to use. And so you're not worrying about fuel, you're just worrying about getting as many resources, as many agents from your opponents to get captives as possible. And Warlord's Cruelty is a great way to do that. It also has an added ability of a prelude action where you may discard this to clear your weapons outrage. And finally, Hidden Harbors. You always build ships fresh. When defending in battle, the attacker cannot collect raid dice if you have a fresh defending starport. So because a fuel drinker taxing a lot, getting a lot of resources, you may be a prime target to be raided, not necessarily for your guild cards, but just for your resources. Particularly for Tycoon, because Tycoon has a lot of resources on the table that people could use to score, and most likely you're going to have 1-2 resources that are in your one key slot. So just having the ability to build your ships always fresh, and also just being able to hide with your starports where they just cannot raid you, would be an excellent card if you just need a defensive mechanism. Now we're looking at our guild cards, and I included one Vox card here. Just like with Mystic, we're going to just shout out Outrage Spreads. If someone secures this and declares fuel, fuel drinkers will have a hard time. That's just the short of it. You'll have a very hard time using your fuel to do anything. It can be very frustrating because you're getting a fuel that you can never use, and if it's ever scored, you're discarding it. So outrage spreads is something just keep in mind. So either use politics to make sure it's not fuel that's outraged, or just get it yourself. Galactic Bards. When you surpass or pivot before taking any actions, you may declare the ambition that on your play card. If an ambition has not been declared yet this round, do not place the 0 marker. The reason we want to think about this card is because we are looking to pivot and copy. And so when we do pivot, or even just choose to surpass, this gives us the ability to declare ambitions, whether it's Tycoon or something else. And so this is just a card to keep in the back of our minds. This is something that does play with our strategy of we don't really want the initiative a lot of the time. We want actually to copy and pivot. And so Galactic Bards gives us another benefit to having that strategy of just not really thinking about the initiative, but letting other people take it. Loyal Impasse, Loyal Keepers. I'm putting both cards here for a few reasons. The main reason is we're getting an extra resource whenever we tax. And so if we can tax a Psionic or tax a Relic, then what these cards lets us do is that with our fuel that we're getting as an extra when we tax with a pivot or with a copy, we can use that fuel to help our combo. So if we're taxing Psionics, we can use our fuel as a Relic with Loyal Keepers, and now we can use a Psionic and Relic combo to get a card in the court. And vice versa. Let's say we're taxing Relics. Well, now I can use my Loyal Impasse to let my fuel be a Psionic, so I can now copy the action to influence with my fuel with the Loyal Impasse, and then use my Relic that I just taxed to secure a card. So these cards are really strong with all the leaders that give you an extra resource when you tax with a pivot or copy, but particularly fuel drinkers. And finally, we have Relic Fence, which is a prelude action. Once per turn, you may discard 1 resource to gain 1 relic. This is just a main way to just mitigate what we may be feeling when we have to use our lavish ability when Tycoon's declared and we get rid of all our fuel. This lets us think about maybe we just want to pivot to Relic, and so now I can tax a Relic, get a fuel, and then on my next prelude, change out my fuel for another Relic. Maybe I'll tax again, so now I have 3 relics plus my Relic Fence, which is another relic icon. So this is just the way to engine and build relics that is unique to leaders like Fuel Drinkers. Okay, so that's what I got for Fuel Drinkers. I do think Fuel Drinkers can be very strong, but it also can be tough as well if you don't have a lot of admin cards to pivot with, and if no one's leading with admin cards to copy. Fuel Drinkers is just a okay leader. It's not wonderful, and the downside can be pretty hard. I have Fuel Drinkers in a B tier, but I could be convinced in the right context where it could be definitely be A tier. If you enjoy this video, definitely give a like. If you have your own thoughts or suggestions, definitely leave a comment below. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks.